In a galaxy where the strongest species bow to ancient predators that hunt between stars, where entire civilizations whisper prayers to creatures that feast on worlds, one human child walked into the most elite military academy in known space. She was 12 years old, armed with nothing but a worn backpack and a stubborn smile that had no business existing on a planet where gods still roamed. The Cathara had ruled for 10 million years. Their empire stretched across 17 galaxies. Their fleets commanded respect through pure terror, and their apex predators, the Devourer Lords, were living legends that could crack planets with their minds alone. No species had ever challenged them. No world had ever said no, until Earth sent a little girl to their academy. What the galaxy didn't know was that humanity had spent 300,000 years becoming the universe's most efficient killers. They just forgot to mention it on their application forms. Now, as young Zara Chen steps through the Academy's massive doors, surrounded by warrior species that tower over her like living mountains, something ancient in the cosmic food chain is about to remember why apex predators don't hunt alone. They hunt in packs. And the pack is coming. The transport ship's landing thrusters kicked up clouds of crimson dust as it settled onto the Academy's primary platform. Through the reinforced viewport, Zara Chen pressed her small face against the cool metal and watched creatures that shouldn't exist lumber across the tarmac with the casual grace of living nightmares. A Vorthak combat instructor, standing nearly 4 meters tall on 6 articulated legs, gestured commands to a formation of armored cadets. Each movement of its blade-tipped appendages carved precise arcs through the air, deadly ballet that spoke of millions of years of evolutionary warfare. The cadets, themselves towering specimens from a dozen warrior races, followed the choreography with religious devotion. Behind them, a Cathara oversight drone drifted silent as death, its crystalline body refracting the red sunlight into rainbow patterns that somehow managed to look ominous. The drone's sensor array tracked every movement, every breath, cataloging data for the empire that had never known defeat. Zara shouldered her worn Earth Standard backpack and checked the clasps one final time. Inside, carefully wrapped in her father's old military jacket, lay the only weapons she'd been allowed to bring: a photograph of her family and a small notebook filled with what the customs inspectors had mistaken for children's drawings. They weren't. The airlock hissed open with a sound like escaping souls, and immediately the atmosphere hit her like a physical blow. Not the air itself, which the environmental processors had made breathable enough for her human lungs, but the weight of predatory attention that seemed to saturate every molecule. This was a place where the food chain had been carved in stone 10 million years ago, where every species knew exactly where they stood in the cosmic hierarchy. Humans, according to the official galactic rankings, didn't even register. Zara stepped onto the platform, her worn sneakers making soft sounds against metal that had been forged in the hearts of dying stars. Around her, the other new arrivals moved with the unconscious confidence of apex species. A trio of hegemony war-form recruits chatted in harmonic frequencies that made the air shimmer. Their natural weapons, retractable bone spikes that could punch through starship hulls, extended and retracted in casual displays of lethal capability. To her left, a young Draconis noble flexed wings that cast shadows like storm clouds, while electromagnetic fields played around his talon tips in patterns that registered as barely contained violence on every predator's instinct in visual range. His scales shifted color constantly, a living aurora that spoke of radioactive homeworlds and evolutionary pressures that would have sterilized Earth in minutes. None of them looked at her. Why would they? The intake record showed her species statistics clearly enough. Humans, average height 1.7 meters, lifespan roughly 80 standard years, no natural weapons, no armor, no flight capability, no telepathic abilities, no radiation resistance worth mentioning. Their homeworld was a single medium-sized planet in an unremarkable system, protected only by distance and the fact that nobody had bothered to conquer something so resource-poor. Zara understood. She'd read the same files during the 3-month journey from Earth. On paper, humans were prey animals that had somehow stumbled into space travel through sheer cosmic luck. The Academy's recruitment officer, a Kythara administrator whose crystal body threw prismatic light across the platform, approached with the measured gait of something that had never needed to hurry. When it spoke, the words formed directly in Zara's mind through telepathic interface, carrying undertones of mild curiosity and profound condescension. Cadet Chen designation Prime Academy 001. You are. The pause stretched long enough for several of the larger cadets to turn and stare, considerably smaller than projected. Yes, sir, Zara replied aloud, her voice barely carrying in the thin air. She'd been coached on proper response protocols during the journey. Never make direct eye contact with Cathara. Never speak unless directly questioned. Always acknowledge your species' inferior position in the hierarchy. The administrator's sensor array rotated to focus on her, and she felt the familiar sensation of being scanned down to the molecular level. This was routine, she'd been told. The Academy needed to establish baseline measurements for proper training regiment assignment. What the scanner found made the administrator pause. Curious! The telepathic voice carried notes of confusion now. Your bone structure indicates stress tolerances well above recorded human norms. Your cardiovascular system appears, another pause, exceptionally robust. Around them, a few of the nearer cadets had started to pay attention. A hegemony warform tilted its massive head, compound eyes focusing on the small human with something approaching interest. The Draconis noble's wing membranes shifted to catch ambient electromagnetic signatures. Sir, Zara said carefully, Earth has many different environmental zones. My family comes from mountain regions, higher gravity, thinner air. We develop differently there. It wasn't entirely a lie. The Chen family had indeed lived in mountainous terrain for generations. What she didn't mention was that the mountains in question were the Himalayas, where her ancestors had spent 3 centuries learning to thrive in conditions that would kill most humans, and that her particular branch of the family tree had been shaped by military programs that didn't appear on any official records. The administrator accepted this explanation with the sort of algorithmic satisfaction that marked artificial intelligences. Outliers existed in every species. Environmental adaptation was well documented. The scan results, while unusual, fell within acceptable parameters for genetic variation. Very well. Report to Dormitory 77 Alpha for orientation and equipment assignment. Your first tactical assessment begins at 0800 tomorrow morning. The administrator glided away without another word, leaving Zara alone among creatures that could have stepped out of humanity's darkest mythology. She started walking toward the dormitory complex, a sprawling structure of organic curves and crystalline angles that seemed to grow from the Academy's foundation rather than being built upon it. Behind her, she heard the first whispers. Look at that one. Human, the records say. Humans? I thought they were still pre-FTL. No, they got warp drive about 50 years ago, but they're harmless. Prey species evolution. No natural weapons, minimal physical capabilities. Then, what's one doing here? The conversation continued in frequency ranges that most species couldn't detect, but Zara's hearing had been trained since childhood to catch sounds others missed. She kept walking, face calm, backpack secure. The dormitory assignment placed her in a room designed for humanoid species, though the scale was obviously intended for beings considerably larger than herself. The bed could have slept 4 humans comfortably. The weapon storage locker was sized for armaments that would require mechanical assistance for her to even lift. She set her backpack on the oversized desk and began unpacking with methodical precision. Her few changes of clothing went into the massive wardrobe. Personal hygiene items found places in a bathroom that featured facilities she couldn't identify. The photograph of her family, mother, father, and her 3 older brothers, all in military dress uniforms, went on the nightstand. The notebook went under her pillow. As evening approached, the Academy's social spaces filled with cadets from across the galaxy. Zara found herself in the main recreation hall, a vast space where anti-gravity fields allowed flying species to socialize at any elevation, while ground-based beings mingled on multiple terraced levels. The conversations were a symphony of violence, training regimens that would pulp baseline humans, combat techniques passed down through millions of years of evolutionary warfare, stories of homeworld conflicts where entire continents had been reshaped by individual warriors. Zara sat at a table sized for someone 3 times her mass and listened. Her ears, trained from childhood to process multiple conversation streams simultaneously, sorted through dozens of overlapping discussions. Her mind, shaped by educational techniques that most humans would have called torture, cataloged every detail: species capabilities, weapon preferences, combat doctrines, psychological profiles, weak points, always weak points. A shadow fell across her table, and she looked up to see a Draconis cadet standing nearby. This one was younger than the noble she'd seen earlier, probably a second or third year student based on the rank markings etched into his scales. His wing membranes were folded tight against his back, and his electromagnetic field showed patterns that registered as curiosity rather than hostility. "You're the human," he said, his voice carrying harmonics that made the table vibrate slightly. "I am Krexai of the 7th Clutch. I have never met a human before." "Sarah Chen," she replied. "Nice to meet you." Krexai settled into the chair across from her with surprising grace for something the size of a small aircraft. His tail, tipped with what looked like a fusion reactor in miniature, coiled around the chair's base. "I have been reading about your species since your arrival was announced," he continued. "The files are confusing. Your people have been spacefaring for only 50 of your years, yet the Academy accepted you as a cadet. This is unprecedented." Zara nodded. "We were surprised too. Earth only got the invitation 6 months ago. I was chosen sort of randomly." That was another careful half-truth. The selection process had taken 3 months and had involved tests that would have been classified as war crimes on most civilized worlds. Zara had been chosen not randomly, but very, very specifically. "Random selection," Krexai mused, electromagnetic fields shifting to patterns that suggested deep thought. "Yet here you are, in an academy where admission requires either noble birth, exceptional combat potential, or," his voice trailed off as he studied her more carefully. "Or what?" Zara asked, though she knew the answer. "Or strategic value to the Empire. Species that might serve useful functions in the cosmic hierarchy." Krexai's head tilted, a gesture that somehow managed to look both curious and predatory. "What function might humans serve, I wonder?" Before Zara could answer, a new voice cut through the background conversations like a fusion blade through flesh. "The prey spawn speaks as though it belongs here." The entire recreation hall went quiet. Standing at the hall's main entrance was a creature that dominated space through pure presence. A Cathara devourer caste, one of the Empire's apex predator breeds, stood nearly 3 meters tall, even in its compact form. Its crystalline body pulsed with energy patterns that registered as barely contained destruction, and its telepathic presence pressed against every mind in the room like a weight of mountains. This was Vorthok the Render, according to the rank insignia that seemed carved from compressed starlight. A noble of the 3rd Ascendancy, combat instructor, and, if the whispers were accurate, personal student of one of the actual Devourer lords that ruled the Empire's military hierarchy. When Vortak moved, it wasn't walking. It was the universe rearranging itself to accommodate something that existed on a level above normal physics. Other cadets scrambled to clear a path, their natural instincts recognizing a predator so far above them that resistance was literally inconceivable. The Devourer caste stopped directly in front of Zara's table. When it spoke, the words bypassed her ears entirely and formed directly in the pain centers of her brain. "Human thing. Your species was granted admission through bureaucratic error. You do not belong in a place meant for warriors." Each word felt like glass shards sliding through her neurons. "You are prey. You exist to be consumed by your betters. The Academy will correct this mistake. The telepathic pressure increased, and Zara felt something fundamental in her nervous system beginning to overload. Around the hall, other cadets watched with the fascination of scavengers observing a feeding. This was the moment, the test that would define everything that came after. Zara looked up at Bartek the Render, apex predator of a species that had ruled the galaxy for 10 million years, and smiled. "You know," she said conversationally, "you're absolutely right. Humans are prey animals." The admission seemed to confuse the Devourer caste. The telepathic pressure decreased slightly as Vorthak processed this unexpected response. "However," Zara continued, standing up from her chair with movements that somehow suggested coiled springs rather than surrender, "there's something the Academy's files might not mention about prey animals." She took a step forward. Not backward, not to the side, but directly toward a creature that could have disintegrated her with a thought. "We've had millions of years to get very, very good at killing the things that hunt us." The recreation hall had gone dead silent. Even the ambient hum of life support systems seemed to pause. Vortak's crystalline form shifted through frequency ranges that suggested confusion rapidly becoming interest. The Devourer caste had encountered many responses to intimidation over its long lifetime. Fear, rage, submission, desperate aggression, all the standard patterns of inferior species when confronted with their natural superiors. But calm, practical observation delivered with a smile that held absolutely no fear? That was new. "Elaborate!" Vorthak commanded, telepathic voice carrying undertones of genuine curiosity. Zara's smile widened slightly. "Oh, I think that would spoil the surprise. But I look forward to tomorrow's tactical assessment." She picked up her backpack, nodded politely to Krexii, and walked toward the dormitory exit with the unhurried pace of someone going for an evening stroll. Behind her, the recreation hall remained silent until she was completely gone. Then the whispers began, spreading from table to table like ripples across water. The human hadn't shown fear, not even a little. And Vortak the Render, apex predator of the apex predator species, was staring at the doorway she'd used with what looked suspiciously like anticipation. In her room, Zara pulled out the notebook from under her pillow and opened to a fresh page. At the top, in careful block letters, she wrote, "Day 1, Academy Assessment." Below that, she began sketching, not the innocent drawings that Customs had seen, but detailed technical diagrams that her father had taught her to create before she could properly read. Anatomical studies, vulnerability assessments, tactical approaches. The first drawing was of Vorthak the Render, showing joint stress points in the crystalline matrix patterns that indicated potential fracture lines. It was going to be an interesting semester. The tactical assessment chamber stretched across nearly 2 kilometers of reinforced space, its walls lined with sensors that could track movement down to the molecular level. Floating observation platforms hovered at strategic points, filled with academy instructors and senior cadets who had come to watch the humans' inevitable failure. Zara stood in the center of the vast arena, dwarfed by the sheer scale of everything around her. Her academy-issued training uniform hung loose on her small frame, designed for beings twice her size. The weapon harness across her chest held standard-issue equipment, a plasma rifle that looked like artillery in her hands, energy grenades that weighed nearly as much as she did, and a vibro-knife that was essentially a short sword from her perspective. Separated by 500 meters of open space, Vorthak the Render waited in what the Academy called training configuration. The Devourer caste had compressed its crystalline form to merely intimidating, though energy still crackled along its surface in patterns that suggested barely contained devastation. Between them, scattered across the arena floor, lay obstacles designed to test tactical thinking under pressure, barrier walls that could stop starship weaponry, gravity wells that shifted without warning, energy fields that would fry most organic beings on contact, moving platforms that required perfect timing to navigate. The assessment was simple in concept, Cadets had to successfully engage their assigned opponent using whatever tactics they deemed appropriate. Victory conditions were flexible. Survival was optional. Academy records showed that roughly 30% of first-year cadets suffered injuries requiring medical intervention during tactical assessments. 5% required resurrection protocols. Humans, according to medical files, had no natural healing factors and extremely limited physical resilience. Current projections suggested Zara would last approximately 43 seconds before requiring medical evacuation. The betting pools among senior cadets had set the over-under at 30 seconds. High above the arena floor, Academy Director Keth Moran observed from the primary command platform. The ancient Cathara's crystalline form had taken on the deep purple coloration that indicated profound concentration, and its telepathic presence filled the observation chamber with an aura of focused attention. "Begin data collection," it ordered the assembled sensor teams. "Full spectrum analysis. I want to understand how this species managed to qualify for admission." The truth was that Director Keth Moran remained puzzled by the human's presence. The Academy's admission algorithms were ancient and proven, refined across millions of years of successful warrior selection. They didn't make mistakes. When the system had flagged humanity for recruitment, there had to be a reason. The problem was that nobody could figure out what that reason might be. Below in the arena, the countdown reached 0. Vortak moved first, as was traditional for senior students facing obvious inferiors. The Devourer caste didn't bother with weapons or elaborate tactics. Instead, it simply began walking towards Zara with the inexorable pace of an advancing glacier, telepathic pressure radiating outward in waves designed to paralyze prey through sheer terror. Standard protocol for facing Devourer caste opponents called for immediate retreat combined with maximum range engagement. Their telepathic abilities made close combat essentially suicide for most species. The correct tactical approach was to use mobility and cover while wearing them down with sustained weapons fire. Zara dropped her plasma rifle. The massive weapon clattered to the arena floor with enough noise to echo off the distant walls. Before the echo faded, she had ditched the energy grenades as well, then the spare ammunition packs, then everything else except the vibro knife. On the observation platforms, instructors leaned forward with expressions ranging from concern to morbid fascination. This was either a complete tactical breakdown or something nobody had anticipated. Vorthak paused in its advance, confusion evident in the stuttering patterns of energy across its crystalline surface. The human was moving toward him, not away. She was abandoning ranged weapons in favor of melee combat against an opponent that could have crushed her entire species with minimal effort. This was either madness or stupidity so profound that it transcended normal categories. Zara broke into a run, not the desperate sprint of prey fleeing from a predator, but the controlled advance of something that had made a tactical decision and was now executing it with precision. Her footsteps rang against the arena floor in a steady rhythm that spoke of trained endurance rather than panic. As she closed the distance, Vorthak began to understand that something was wrong. The human's movement patterns weren't random. She was navigating the obstacle course with efficiency that suggested prior knowledge of optimal routing. Her approach vector avoided the worst of the gravity wells, while using the barrier walls to break line of sight at regular intervals. More importantly, she wasn't showing any response to telepathic pressure. Most species experienced increasing psychological distress as they approached Devourer caste opponents. Fear, doubt, existential terror, the natural responses of evolved beings when confronted with something that registered as an apex predator on every instinctive level. Zara Chen appeared to be completely immune. When she reached the 50-meter mark, Vortak decided that analysis could wait. The human was clearly suffering from some sort of neurological malfunction that prevented proper threat assessment. The merciful response would be to end this quickly. The Devourer caste extended one crystalline appendage and focused destructive energy along its length. The resulting beam would have carved through starship armor like paper. At this range, against an unshielded organic target, it would cause instantaneous vaporization. Zara wasn't there. The human had dropped into a slide that took her under the energy beam with millimeters to spare. Her momentum carried her between Vortak's legs. An impossible maneuver given the Devourer cast's size and reach, except that she had somehow calculated the exact timing required to slip through what should have been certain death. Before Vortak could track her new position, Zara was moving again. Not random evasion, but a specific pattern of movement that kept her in the Devourer cast's blind spots while gradually working towards something. It took Vortak nearly 10 seconds to realize what she was doing. The human was studying him. Each pass brought her close enough to observe joint articulations, energy flow patterns, and structural stress points. She was mapping his defensive capabilities through direct observation under combat conditions. No untrained cadet should have possessed the tactical knowledge to attempt such analysis. No baseline organic should have had the reflexes to execute it successfully against Devourer cast reaction times. And no prey species should have had the psychological resilience to maintain focus while being actively hunted by something designed to inspire existential terror. Fascinating, Director Kethmorin murmured from the observation platform. The human appears to be treating this as a research exercise rather than a survival scenario. Around the arena, senior cadets who had come to watch an execution were leaning forward with growing interest. Whatever they were witnessing, it wasn't following standard patterns for academy assessments. Vortak decided to escalate. The Devourer cast shifted to full combat configuration, crystalline body expanding to its natural 3-meter height, while energy fields began building to levels that made the air itself fluoresce. When Devourer cast warriors prepared for serious combat, the local environment tended to suffer collateral damage. Zara finally stopped moving. She crouched behind a barrier wall approximately 30 meters from Vortak's position, vibroknife held in a grip that suggested actual training rather than desperate improvisation. For the first time since the assessment began, she was completely motionless. Ready to surrender, prey spawn? Vortak's telepathic voice carried amusement now. Your evasion displays impressive conditioning for an inferior species, but this charade ends now. Actually, Zara called back, her voice carrying clearly across the arena, I think you're right. This charade has gone on long enough. She stood up from behind the barrier and walked into open ground where Vortak could see her clearly. The vibroknife hung loose in her hand, no longer held in any recognizable combat stance. I surrender, she announced. The arena fell silent. Vortak's energy fields flickered with confusion. Surrender was a recognized option during academy assessments, though it resulted in automatic failure and usually led to immediate expulsion. But the timing made no sense. The human had demonstrated remarkable evasion capabilities. Why give up now when she could have continued the game for several more minutes? Surrender acknowledged, Vortak replied after a moment. Assessment terminated. Director Kethmorin activated the general communication system. Combat scenario concluded. Medical teams to standby. Cadet Chen, report to the command platform for debriefing. But Zara didn't move toward the command platform. Instead, she walked directly to where she had dropped the plasma rifle and began collecting her abandoned equipment. Cadet Chen. Director Kethmorin's telepathic voice carried notes of mild impatience. Report for debriefing immediately. Just a moment, sir, Zara replied, shouldering the massive plasma rifle with movements that suggested long familiarity rather than struggle. I need to check something first. She turned back toward Vortak, who was still standing in the center of the arena in full combat configuration. Hey, Vortak, she called out. Quick question. During that last exchange, when you expanded to full combat size, did you notice any structural stress in your lower crystalline matrix? The Devourer cast's energy fields shifted to patterns that indicated confusion. What? Your lower matrix, the integration points between your torso and leg assemblies. When you shifted configuration under combat stress, I noticed some harmonic fluctuations that suggest potential stability issues. Vortak looked down at his own body with something approaching concern. Devourer caste physiology was supposedly flawless, refined across millions of years of evolutionary pressure. Structural weaknesses were theoretical impossibilities. "I detect no anomalies," he stated. "Oh, you wouldn't be able to feel it during normal operation," Zara explained helpfully. "The resonance frequency is too subtle for internal sensors, but from an external observation standpoint, it's pretty obvious." She raised the plasma rifle. "Want me to show you?" The shot took Vortak completely by surprise. Not because he couldn't have blocked it. Devour-cast defensive capabilities made them essentially immune to standard energy weapons, but because the human had aimed for a point that shouldn't have mattered. A minor structural junction that carried no vital systems and served no critical function. The plasma beam struck the exact intersection between Vortak's torso and left leg assembly, delivering energy directly into what the Academy's medical files listed as non-critical structural matrix. Vortak felt something he had never experienced before, his own body failing him. The harmonic resonance that Zara had identified turned the plasma beam's energy into a feedback loop that propagated through his entire skeletal structure. What should have been a minor impact became a cascade failure that brought a 3-meter devourer cast crashing to the arena floor in a shower of crystalline fragments. The arena remained silent for nearly 30 seconds. On the observation platforms, instructors stared at readouts that shouldn't have been possible. Academy medical sensors showed Vortak's vital signs as stable, but his structural integrity had dropped to critical levels from a single plasma rifle shot. Weapon that shouldn't have been able to penetrate Devourer-cast defenses had just incapacitated one of the Academy's senior combat instructors through what appeared to be precise application of engineering principles. Director Kethmoran's telepathic presence swept across the arena with the force of a scanning array operating at maximum resolution. When it focused on Zara, she felt the sensation of being examined by something vast and ancient and profoundly intelligent. "Cadet Chen." The director's mental voice carried overtones that suggested a complete reassessment of previous assumptions. "Report to the command platform immediately." "Yes, sir," Zara replied, setting down the plasma rifle with careful precision. "Should I bring my notebook?" "Your what?" "My notebook. I've been keeping track of structural analysis observations since arrival. I have sketches of most of the senior staff's potential vulnerability points. Thought they might be useful for Academy defense planning." The silence that followed this announcement stretched long enough for Vortak to slowly reassemble himself into something resembling functional configuration. "Bring the notebook," Director Kethmoran finally managed. As Zara walked toward the command platform, conversations erupted across the observation areas. Senior cadets who had come to watch an execution were instead trying to process the implications of what they had witnessed. A human, classified as a prey species with minimal combat potential, had just defeated a devourer caste through applied engineering analysis. Krexahai, the young Draconis who had spoken with her the previous evening, was the first to voice what everyone was thinking. What exactly are humans? On the command platform, Director Kethmoranum was wondering the same thing. The Academy's admission algorithms had flagged humanity for recruitment, but the species profile suggested primitive tool users with limited strategic capacity. The creature climbing toward the command platform demonstrated observational skills that surpassed most graduate-level tactical analysts. Engineering knowledge that shouldn't have existed in a species with 50 years of spaceflight experience, and psychological resilience that bordered on impossible. Either humanity had been catastrophically misclassified, or Earth had sent something other than a normal human to the Academy. Zara reached the command platform and offered a respectful bow to Director Kethmoran. "Sir, you wanted to see me?" "Indeed." The director's telepathic voice carried harmonics that suggested deep thought. "Your tactical assessment presents several anomalies that require clarification." "I imagine so, sir. I probably should have mentioned that humans have different educational approaches than most species." "Elaborate." "Well, sir, most of the galaxy seems to focus on individual combat excellence or species-specific advantages. Natural weapons, armor, special abilities, that sort of thing." Zara pulled the notebook from her pocket. "Humans tend to be more systematic in our approach to problem solving. Director Kath Morin examined the notebook's contents through telepathic interface, expecting to find crude sketches and basic observations. Instead, the pages contained technical analyses that would have challenged graduate students in xenobiology, TEDdy, engineering assessments that showed comprehensive understanding of advanced materials science, and tactical summaries that demonstrated strategic thinking at levels typically seen only in command track officers. More disturbing were the anatomical studies, detailed drawings of every species Zara had encountered since arriving at the academy, complete with annotated vulnerability assessments and tactical recommendations for engagement. "Where did you learn to create analyses of this sophistication?" Director Kath Morin asked. "Oh, this is pretty basic stuff, sir. My dad taught me when I was little. He said it was important to understand how things worked." Zara paused. He also said that understanding how things worked was the first step toward understanding how to break them. Director Kath Morin felt something that ancient Kithara rarely experienced: concern. "What was your father's profession?" "Military engineer, sir. He specialized in rapid structural assessment during combat operations." Another pause. Though he said most of his real education came from growing up on Earth during what he called the quiet times. "The quiet times?" "The periods between major wars, sir, when humans had time to study what they'd learned from fighting each other." Director Kath Morin's crystalline form shifted through color spectrums that indicated rapid information processing. Earth's military history, according to galactic databases, consisted primarily of primitive conflicts using basic chemical explosives and kinetic weapons, nothing that would have produced strategic thinking capable of challenging Devourer caste. But the evidence suggested otherwise. "Cadet Chen," Director Kath Morin said carefully, "what exactly did your species do during the 300,000 years before achieving spaceflight?" Zara's expression turned thoughtful, as though the question had never occurred to her before. "Oh, that's easy, sir. We practiced." The implications of that answer settled over the command platform like a dark star's gravity well. In the arena below, Vortak had finally managed to restore basic structural integrity. The Devourer caste looked up toward the command platform, where a 12-year-old human was calmly discussing military engineering with the academy director, and experienced something that apex predators weren't supposed to feel: uncertainty. If the human child's notebook contained accurate assessments of academy personnel, then every species represented in the academy's student body had been cataloged, analyzed, and reduced to tactical data by a creature whose entire species was supposed to be harmless. And if humans had spent 300,000 years practicing warfare on each other before anyone else in the galaxy had even noticed their existence, Vorthak began to understand why the Academy's ancient admission algorithms had flagged humanity for recruitment. They weren't recruiting Earth for humanity's potential as allies. They were recruiting Earth to keep humanity from becoming enemies. 3 weeks into the academy semester, Director Kath Morin faced a problem that 10 million years of Kithara administrative experience had never prepared him for: a human who was systematically rewriting the fundamental assumptions of galactic military doctrine. The crisis had begun small, as most revolutions did. Zara Chen's tactical assessment scores were impossibly high, but individual excellence wasn't unprecedented at the academy. Her strategic analysis exercises showed insight that challenged senior instructors, but exceptional students sometimes emerged from unexpected sources. The real problem was that she was teaching. "Sir," Combat Instructor Vex Talk reported during the morning briefing, "the human has established what she terms study groups with 17 other cadets from 12 different species." Director Kath Morin's crystalline form shifted to deeper purple hues. Study groups weren't forbidden, but they were unusual at an academy where most students viewed their classmates as future rivals. Natural selection pressures had bred competitive instincts into every warrior species in the galaxy. Cooperation beyond species lines was essentially unheard of. "What are they studying?" he asked. According to surveillance recordings, they appear to be conducting mutual vulnerability assessments. The human provides structural analysis of their opponent's defenses, while they provide detailed information about their own species' combat capabilities. That seems counterproductive for the non-human participants. That's what we thought initially, sir. But follow-up analysis suggests a more complex pattern. The other species are receiving tactical knowledge that significantly improves their combat effectiveness against traditional opponents. Meanwhile, the human is creating a comprehensive database of combat information that covers most of the Academy's student body. Director Keth Moran processed this information with growing unease. Military intelligence gathering was standard practice, but Zara's approach suggested systematic preparation for conflict on a scale that exceeded normal Academy parameters. B. Continue monitoring and schedule a personal meeting with Cadet Chen for this afternoon. But before the meeting could take place, the situation escalated dramatically. The triggering incident occurred during Advanced Combat Theory class, where senior instructor Mordak had been presenting traditional Kythara battle doctrine to a mixed-species audience. The lesson covered the hegemony wars of approximately 2 million years ago, when the Kythara Empire had achieved final dominance over all rival civilizations. Instructor Mordak, a veteran of 17 major campaigns, was explaining the tactical principles that had made Kythara victory inevitable when a small voice interrupted from the back of the classroom. "Excuse me, sir, but I think there might be a problem with that formation." Mordak's telepathic attention focused on Zara with the intensity of a targeting array. Interrupting senior instructors was a serious breach of Academy protocol, particularly when the interruption questioned established military doctrine. "Elaborate, Cadet Chen." "Well, sir, you're describing a standard pincer movement with Devourer cast spearheads supported by massed conventional forces. But the formation assumes that your opponents will respond with traditional counter-envelopment tactics. This assumption proved correct, as evidenced by our complete victory." "Yes, sir, but only because your opponents were thinking like individual warriors rather than coordinated military units." Zara stood up, navigating between desks sized for beings twice her height. "May I demonstrate what I mean?" Mordak's response carried the telepathic equivalent of an amused sigh. "Very well. Enlighten us." The classroom's holographic display system activated at Zara's touch, projecting a three-dimensional battlefield that showed the historical engagement Mordak had been describing. Kythera forces appeared as crystalline formations, while enemy positions showed as various geometric patterns representing different species. "The problem," Zara explained, manipulating the display to zoom in on specific unit positions, "is that your enemies were fighting as separate species rather than as integrated tactical elements." Her fingers moved across the control interface with surprising precision, reshuffling enemy formations into patterns that looked nothing like traditional galactic military doctrine. But if they had approached the engagement differently, the holographic display shifted to show enemy forces reorganizing themselves. Instead of species-specific formations fighting according to their natural advantages, the units began combining capabilities in ways that created synergistic effects. Heavy assault troops from armored species provided mobile cover for fast attack forces from aerial species. Telepathic communicators from psychic species coordinated targeting data for long-range specialists from high-precision species. Energy-based attackers from elemental species provided supporting fire for close combat specialists from melee-focused species. "You see," Zara continued, "individually, each species has natural strengths and weaknesses. But when you combine their capabilities systematically, the weaknesses cancel out while the strengths multiply." The holographic battle played out according to Zara's revised tactics, and the results were disturbing. Kythara forces that had achieved historical victory through overwhelming superiority found themselves facing opponents that could match their capabilities through coordinated application of diverse abilities. The simulation ended with what could only be described as a stalemate. Instructor Mordak stared at the display with expressions that indicated profound discomfort. In 10 million years of galactic dominance, the Kythara had never faced coordinated resistance from multiple species working in true tactical integration. "Cadet Chen," he said carefully, "where did you learn combined species tactical doctrine?" "Oh, I made it up just now, sir, but the basic principles are pretty simple. My dad always said that the best weapon against any enemy was another enemy who understood their weaknesses." Around the classroom, cadets from a dozen different species were staring at the holographic display with expressions ranging from fascination to horror. What Zara had demonstrated wasn't just military theory. It was a blueprint for challenging Kythara dominance, using resources that already existed within the Empire. "Class dismissed," Instructor Mordak announced abruptly. "Cadet Chen, remain behind." As the other students filed out, Zara found herself alone with a Kythara military veteran who had participated in the actual historical battle she had just rewritten. "Cadet Chen," Mordag said, his telepathic voice carrying harmonics that suggested dangerous levels of focused attention. "Do you understand the implications of what you have just demonstrated?" "I think so, sir." Combined arms tactics using diverse species capabilities could significantly alter the strategic balance in this region of space. That is correct, Dave Vidge. Dave, such knowledge could destabilize the existing order that has maintained galactic peace for millions of years. Zara nodded thoughtfully. "Yes, sir. That's why it's important to make sure the right people understand these principles before the wrong people figure them out." Mordak's crystalline structure shifted through frequency ranges that indicated confusion. "Explain." "Well, sir, revolutionary military doctrine tends to spread eventually. That's just how information works. So the choice isn't whether these tactics will be developed, but who develops them first." Zara paused. "The Academy trains military leaders from across the galaxy. If they understand combined species doctrine, they can use it to maintain stability rather than threaten it." The logic was sound, but Mordak detected underlying implications that made him profoundly uncomfortable. "And if the Academy chooses not to pursue this knowledge, then someone else will, sir. Probably someone who doesn't share the Empire's interest in maintaining peaceful stability." That afternoon, Director Keth Moran received a priority briefing that confirmed his worst fears about humanity's presence at the Academy. "Sir," Intelligence Coordinator Feltar reported, "we have completed our analysis of Cadet Chen's study group activities. The results are concerning." "In what way?" "The human appears to be systematically identifying and recruiting individuals who represent strategic capabilities rather than personal excellence. Her group includes cadets from every major military power in this galactic region, but specifically those who have access to classified technical knowledge, tactical databases, or command-level military intelligence." Director Keth Moran felt his ancient consciousness focusing with the intensity that had once made him one of the Empire's most effective military commanders. "Are you suggesting espionage?" "Not in the traditional sense, sir. She's not extracting information through deception or coercion. Instead, she's creating voluntary cooperation through what appears to be genuine educational exchange." "Elaborate." "The human provides each participant with tactical analysis that genuinely improves their individual combat effectiveness. In return, they share technical specifications and strategic data from their homeworld militaries. The exchange appears mutually beneficial, but the cumulative effect is that she's acquiring comprehensive intelligence about military capabilities across most of the known galaxy." Director Keth Moran processed this information with growing unease. Traditional espionage could be detected and countered through established security protocols, but voluntary information sharing between students fell within normal academy activities. "What is your assessment of her ultimate objectives?" "Unknown, sir, but her pattern of recruitment suggests strategic thinking that exceeds normal academy parameters. She's not gathering random information. She's building a specific knowledge base that would support large-scale military planning." That evening, Director Keth Moran requested a private meeting with Zara. They met in his personal office, a space that existed partially outside normal dimensions to accommodate Kythara administrative needs. "Cadet Chen," he began, "your activities at the Academy have attracted significant attention from security personnel." "I imagine so, sir. I probably should have asked permission before starting the study groups." "The study groups are not the primary concern. Rather, We are interested in understanding your long-term objectives regarding the military intelligence you have been gathering." Zara's expression remained calm, but Director Kethmoran detected subtle changes in her biorhythm that suggested careful consideration of her response. "Sir, may I ask you a question?" "Proceed. How long do you think the current galactic power structure will remain stable?" The question surprised Director Kethmoran. Strategic analysis of imperial stability wasn't typically a concern for first-year cadets. The Kithara Empire has maintained order for 10 million years. Barring unforeseen developments, this stability should continue indefinitely. "With respect, sir, I don't think that's accurate." Director Kethmoran felt something that ancient administrators weren't supposed to experience. "Genuine surprise? Explain your reasoning." "Well, sir, the Empire's power is based on individual superior capabilities. Kithara warriors are stronger, faster, and more intelligent than their opponents. Devourer caste troops can defeat conventional forces through pure physical dominance. This works as long as your enemies fight as individuals or small groups. This has proven effective for millions of years." "Yes, sir, but only because most species think like apex predators. They compete with each other instead of cooperating against common threats." Zara paused. "But that's starting to change." "How so?" "Communication technology, sir. Faster than light travel. Galactic trade networks. For the first time in evolutionary history, different species can coordinate their activities across interstellar distances in real time." Director Kethmoran began to understand where this analysis was leading, and the implications made him profoundly uncomfortable. "You believe that coordinated resistance to imperial authority is inevitable?" "Not inevitable, sir, but increasingly probable. The military principles I demonstrated in class aren't particularly complex. Any competent strategist could develop them independently given sufficient motivation." "And what sort of motivation might provide sufficient cause?" Zara's smile carried undertones that suggested she was enjoying this conversation far more than she probably should. "Oh, that's easy, sir. Fear. Fear of what?" "Fear of humans." The statement hung in the air between them like a gravitational anomaly. "Cadet Chen, your species is classified as having minimal military potential. What could possibly make humanity a source of fear for established galactic powers?" "Well, sir, that classification is based on individual human capabilities. And you're absolutely right. Individually, humans are pretty harmless. But we don't usually fight individually." "Elaborate." "Humans are pack hunters, sir. We've spent 300,000 years learning how to coordinate group tactics against opponents that were individually superior to us. Every major predator on Earth was bigger, stronger, and better armed than we were. So we learned to think systematically about warfare." Director Kethmoran felt ancient memories stirring, recollections of the early days of Kithara expansion when they had occasionally encountered species that displayed unexpected tactical sophistication. "And you believe that this systematic approach to warfare represents a threat to imperial stability?" "Not from humans alone, sir. Even working together, my species probably couldn't challenge the Empire directly. But we're very good at teaching other people how to work together effectively." The full implications of Zara's presence at the Academy suddenly became clear to Director Kethmoran. Humanity hadn't been recruited for their military potential. They had been recruited because the Academy's ancient algorithms had detected the emergence of a species that could teach galactic warfare to everyone else. The study groups weren't academic exercises. They were training codders for a new form of military organization that could challenge the fundamental basis of Kithara power. And Zara Chen, 12 years old and smiling like someone who was genuinely happy to be helpful, was systematically creating the leadership network that would make such organization possible. "Cadet Chen," Director Kethmoran said carefully, "what would you recommend as the appropriate response to this situation?" "Oh, that's simple, sir. Join us." "I beg your pardon." The Empire has two choices. It can try to suppress combined species military doctrine, which probably won't work because the information is already spreading. Or it can embrace the new paradigm and use superior Cathara capabilities to lead coordinated galactic military forces instead of dominating them. Director Keth Morin processed this suggestion with growing fascination. You're proposing that the Empire should voluntarily restructure its military philosophy to incorporate tactical principles developed by a species that achieved spaceflight 50 years ago. Yes, sir. Because the alternative is that someone else will develop those same principles and use them to challenge imperial authority. Zara paused. And honestly, sir, you really don't want to find out what happens when a species that spent 300,000 years perfecting group warfare decides that the current galactic order needs to be changed. That night, Director Kethmoran sent an encrypted message to the Caithara High Command that would reshape Imperial military policy for the first time in geological ages. The subject line read, "Urgent strategic assessment, human integration protocols required." In her dormitory room, Zara Chen opened her notebook to a fresh page and wrote, Day 21, Successful Integration of Imperial Command Structure into Cooperative Framework. Phase 2, ready to commence. Below that, she began sketching tactical deployment patterns that would allow combined human Caithara forces to respond to threats that neither species could handle alone. Because somewhere in the galaxy, other civilizations were beginning to understand that the balance of power was shifting. And not all of them were interested in joining the new paradigm peacefully. The first sign that Zara's activities had attracted attention beyond the Academy came during morning combat exercises, when long-range sensors detected 17 unidentified vessels approaching the Academy star system. Director Keth Morin reviewed the sensor data with growing concern. The approaching ships represented a coalition that shouldn't have existed. Military vessels from 7 different species that had never cooperated on anything more complex than trade agreements. Intelligence assessment? He requested from his senior staff. Preliminary analysis suggests a joint expedition, sir, reported Coordinator Feltar. Lead vessels appear to be hegemony battlecruisers, supported by Draconis fast attack wings, Vorthak siege platforms, and at least 3 other species we haven't positively identified. What could possibly motivate such diverse species to coordinate military action? Unknown, sir. But their trajectory suggests this system is their primary destination. Director Keth Moran felt ancient pattern recognition algorithms activating in his consciousness. In 10 million years of Imperial history, multi-species coalitions had formed exactly 3 times. Each occasion had marked the beginning of galactic conflicts that required centuries to resolve. Time to arrival? Approximately 6 hours, sir. Signal Academy Security to implement Protocol 7. All combat instructors to report for emergency briefing and locate Cadet Chen immediately. But when Academy Security attempted to locate Zara, they discovered something that transformed concern into alarm. She wasn't in her dormitory or any of the common areas or the training facilities. She was in the Academy's primary tactical center, surrounded by displays showing real-time positions of the approaching coalition fleet. Cadet Chen. Director Keth Morin's telepathic voice carried harmonics of barely controlled displeasure when he arrived at the tactical center. Explain your presence in a restricted facility. Sorry, sir, Zara replied without looking away from the displays. I got curious when the long-range sensors started showing unusual activity patterns. I wanted to understand what was happening. Academy security protocols prohibit cadet access to strategic intelligence systems. Yes, sir. I probably should have asked permission first. I think we have a bigger problem right now. Director Keth Morin examined the tactical displays and immediately understood what had attracted Zara's attention. The approaching coalition wasn't following standard military approach patterns. Instead, their formation suggested preparation for siege operations. What is your assessment of their intentions? He asked. Well, sir, based on the ship types and formation structure, I'd say they're here to either capture or destroy something they consider strategically important. Zara indicated specific vessel positions on the display. The hegemony cruisers are configured for planetary bombardment. The Draconis wings are positioned for rapid assault deployment, and those Vorthak platforms are carrying siege equipment designed for cracking hardened installations. You can determine all of this from sensor readings? Oh yes, sir. Ship configuration analysis is pretty basic tactical intelligence. My dad taught me when I was 8. Zara paused. The question is what they think is worth this level of military commitment. Director Kethmurin suspected he already knew the answer, but decided to test Zara's analytical capabilities. What do you believe motivates this expedition? Me, sir. The simple response confirmed Director Kethmurin's fears. Somehow, despite the Academy's security protocols, information about humanity's strategic capabilities had reached other galactic powers. Elaborate your reasoning. Well, sir, the timing is pretty obvious. This coalition formed approximately 3 weeks ago, right around the time I demonstrated Combined Species Tactical Doctrine in Advanced Combat Theory class. The participating species are all major military powers that would be significantly threatened by widespread adoption of coordinated warfare techniques. Zara manipulated the display to show detailed analysis of each approaching vessel. More importantly, their ship configuration suggests they're not planning to negotiate. The hegemony has never committed this level of military resources unless they intended to achieve complete tactical objectives through force. Director Kethmurin processed this assessment with growing unease. If Zara was correct, the Academy was about to face military action from a coalition specifically designed to prevent the spread of human strategic knowledge. What do you recommend? Honestly, sir? Run away. The suggestion surprised Director Kethmurin. Throughout her time at the Academy, Zara had demonstrated remarkable tactical sophistication. Recommending retreat seemed uncharacteristic. Explain. Sir, the Academy contains approximately 3,000 cadets from 47 different species. Most of them represent the military leadership potential of their respective homeworlds. If this coalition is willing to attack an Imperial facility to prevent the spread of Combined Species Doctrine, they're probably planning to eliminate everyone who might have learned it. The Academy is under Imperial protection. Direct attack would constitute an active war against the Kythara Empire. Yes, sir. But if they can eliminate all witnesses to what happened here, they could claim the Academy suffered an accident or was destroyed by unknown forces.
Zara indicated specific points on the tactical display.
Their formation suggests preparation for complete sterilization operations. Director Kethmurin felt something that ancient administrators weren't supposed to experience: genuine fear.
What would you suggest as alternative approaches?
Well, sir, we could try to negotiate, but I don't think that would work. Because the real problem isn't what I've already taught. It's what I might teach in the future. Meaning? The tactical principles I've demonstrated so far are pretty basic applications of combined arms doctrine, but humans have been developing military theory for a lot longer than 3 weeks. Zara's expression turned thoughtful. If they're this worried about beginner-level coordination techniques, they're really not going to like the advanced stuff. Before Director Kethmurin could respond, Academy communication systems activated with an incoming transmission from the Coalition fleet. The voice that emerged from the speakers carried the harmonic frequencies of a hegemony fleet commander, backed by the electronic signatures that indicated multiple species were monitoring the communication. Academy Director Kethmurin. I am War Leader Vexan of the Hegemony 3rd Battle Fleet. You are harboring an individual whose presence represents a strategic threat to galactic stability. Surrender the human-designated Zara Chen for immediate termination, and our forces will withdraw without further action. Director Kethmurin felt ancient loyalty protocols activating in his consciousness. The Academy had never surrendered a cadet to external forces, regardless of political pressure. War Leader Vexan, the individual you reference is under Imperial protection as an enrolled Academy cadet. I decline your request, Director Kethmurin. I am not making a request. The coalition forces under my command represent 7 major galactic powers. We have unanimous authorization to use whatever force is necessary to prevent the spread of human military doctrine. Surrender the target individual, or we will take her by force. I repeat, my decline. Academy facilities remain under Imperial protection. Very well. You have 2 hours to reconsider your position. After that time, we will begin bombardment operations. The transmission ended, leaving the tactical center in silence. Sir, Zara said after a moment, I really think we should consider the running away option. Director Cathmoran examined the tactical situation with grim professional assessment. The Academy's defensive systems were formidable, designed to protect against normal military threats. But 7 coordinated species represented firepower levels that exceeded design parameters. Academy defenses are insufficient to repel a sustained assault from coalition forces of this magnitude, he admitted. Yes, sir, but that's not actually our biggest problem. Teddy, what is our biggest problem? Well, sir, even if we successfully defend against this attack, more coalition forces will follow. The knowledge of combined species tactics is already spreading through the Academy's student body. Every cadet who returns to their homeworld will carry that information with them. Zara manipulated the tactical display to show a projection of information dispersal patterns. Within 6 months, military leaders across the galaxy will understand basic coordination principles. Within 2 years, most major powers will have developed their own versions of combined arms doctrine. The strategic balance that has maintained imperial dominance for 10 million years will be permanently altered. And you believe this change is inevitable? Yes, sir. The information is too useful to suppress effectively, but we can control how the transition happens. Director Cathmoran felt pattern recognition algorithms reaching conclusions that challenged fundamental assumptions about Imperial strategy.
What do you propose? We accelerate the timeline, sir.
Instead of letting coordination techniques spread randomly through gradual information leakage, we systematically teach them to everyone at once. That seems counterproductive to Imperial interests. Not if we do it right, sir. The Empire has 2 advantages that nobody else possesses: superior individual capabilities and existing command authority over most galactic military forces. Zara highlighted specific elements of the tactical projection. If the Empire leads the transition to combined species doctrine, it maintains strategic superiority through better implementation of the new paradigm. But if the Empire opposes the transition, other powers will develop coordination capabilities independently and use them to challenge Imperial authority. Director Cathmoran processed this analysis with growing fascination. The logic was sound, but implementing it would require strategic decisions at levels far above Academy authority. Such policy changes would require high command authorization. Yes, sir. But I think we might be able to demonstrate the concept on a smaller scale first. How? Well, sir, we currently have approximately 3,000 cadets from 47 different species, all of whom understand basic combined arms principles. And we have a coalition fleet approaching with the intention of eliminating everyone who possesses that knowledge. Director Cathmoran began to understand what Zara was proposing, and the implications made him simultaneously fascinated and horrified. You're suggesting that we use Academy cadets as a combined species military force? It would be an excellent practical demonstration of coordinated tactical doctrine under actual combat conditions. Academy cadets are students, not experienced soldiers. True, sir. But they represent the elite military potential of their respected species, and they've all been training in combined arms techniques for the past 3 weeks. Zara paused. More importantly, they have something the coalition forces don't expect. What? They know how to work together. Director Cathmoran felt decision trees converging toward a choice that would reshape the fundamental nature of Imperial military policy. Cadet Chen, are you suggesting that we engage coalition forces using Academy cadets as a combined species task force under Academy command authority? Yes, sir, though I think engage might be too strong a term. I'd prefer educate. Explain the distinction. Well, sir, the coalition is here because they're afraid of what coordinated species might accomplish working together. Instead of fighting them, we could show them what coordinated species can accomplish working together. And you believe this demonstration would convince them to abandon their aggressive intentions? Oh no, sir. I think it would convince them to join us instead. That afternoon, Director Keth Moran sent 2 messages that would alter the course of galactic history. The first went to Kythara High Command, requesting emergency authorization for Academy forces to engage in active military operations under expanded Imperial doctrine. The second went to every cadet in the Academy, requesting voluntary participation in what he described as an advanced practical exercise in combined species tactical coordination. The response to the second message surprised even Zara. Within 2 hours, every single cadet had volunteered, not because they were eager for combat, but because they finally understood what she had been teaching them from the beginning. Individual excellence had limits, but there were no limits to what different species could accomplish when they worked together with systematic coordination and mutual respect. And in approximately 18 hours, they were going to prove it to a galaxy that had forgotten how to cooperate. In her dormitory room, Zara opened her notebook to a new page and wrote, Day 42, Phase 3 implementation successful. Galaxy-wide demonstration ready to commence. Below that, she began sketching formation patterns that would allow 47 different species to function as a single unified military force, because tomorrow, the Academy would teach the galaxy a lesson that would echo across the stars for millions of years. Sometimes the best defense against fear was showing people there was nothing to be afraid of, and sometimes the best weapon against division was demonstrating the power of unity. The Battle of Academy Station lasted exactly 17 minutes and 43 seconds. Galactic historians would later mark it as the moment when 10 million years of Imperial doctrine gave way to something unprecedented. War leader Vex Han of the Hegemony 3rd Battle Fleet had expected to face Academy defensive systems operated by Cathara military personnel. Standard Imperial doctrine called for concentrated defensive positions designed to maximize the effectiveness of individually superior Cathara warriors. Instead, his coalition forces encountered something that military theory had suggested was impossible. 3,000 cadets from 47 different species operating as a single unified tactical entity. The opening engagement revealed the fundamental flaw in the coalition's strategic planning. They had prepared to fight an academy. Instead, they found themselves facing the prototype of galactic military evolution. Draconis aerial units, instead of operating independently, provided reconnaissance and targeting data for Vorthax siege specialists who had repositioned their weapons to support hegemony shock troops advancing under cover provided by crystalline species that had restructured their defensive matrices to protect allies rather than themselves. Energy-based attacks from species with natural plasma generation capabilities were coordinated with kinetic strikes from species with superior physical strength, creating combined arms barrages that overwhelmed coalition defensive systems through sheer tactical sophistication. Most disturbing of all, the Academy forces demonstrated casualty evacuation and battlefield medical protocols that allowed wounded personnel from any species to receive appropriate treatment from medically trained cadets of completely different biological origins. This is impossible, war leader Vexan transmitted to his coalition partners as Academy forces systematically dismantled his fleet's attack formations. Different species cannot coordinate at these levels of tactical integration. Apparently they can, replied Wing Commander Torseth of the Draconis contingent, watching as his fastest interceptors were being systematically outmaneuvered by Academy pilots who were sharing real-time tactical data across species lines. The question is how? The answer became clear when coalition forces attempted their final assault on Academy Station itself. Instead of meeting concentrated resistance at the station's defensive perimeter, coalition troops found themselves facing what could only be described as a teaching exercise. Academy cadets weren't trying to kill invading forces. They were demonstrating superior tactical principles through practical application. Each coalition advance was met by perfectly coordinated responses that neutralized threats through minimum necessary force. while providing clear examples of how combined species doctrine could achieve tactical objectives that individual species could never accomplish alone. When hegemony assault troops attempted to breach the station's primary hull, they found their advance blocked not by weapons fire, but by interlocking defensive positions that made forward movement impossible without inflicting massive casualties on beings who were clearly not trying to cause similar casualties in return. When Vortex siege platforms attempted to force entry through concentrated bombardment, their weapons were systematically disabled by strike teams that somehow included the technical expertise as necessary to safely neutralize Vortex military systems from 7 different participating species. Most importantly, when individual coalition personnel found themselves cut off from their primary units during the confused fighting, Academy cadets provided medical assistance, tactical extraction, and safe return to coalition lines regardless of which species the stranded personnel represented. War Leader Vexen. Director Keth Maureen's voice came across coalition communication channels with the calm authority of someone who had just proven a point. I believe we have adequately demonstrated that your concerns about Academy security were unfounded. What do you mean? Vexen demanded. Your coalition attacked this facility because you feared that combined species military doctrine would destabilize galactic peace. We have just shown you that properly implemented coordination techniques actually enhance stability by making warfare less destructive for all participants. You defeated our forces through military action. War Leader, please review your casualty reports. Vexen accessed his fleet's damage assessment files and found statistics that challenged everything he understood about military engagement. Despite 17 minutes of intensive combat involving 7 species and over 400 military vessels, total coalition casualties numbered exactly 0. 0 deaths. 0 permanent injuries. 0 vessels destroyed or damaged beyond repair capability. Academy forces had neutralized an attacking fleet without causing any harm to the attackers. This is impossible, he repeated. War Leader. A new voice joined the communication channel. Small, young, and carrying undertones of gentle amusement. This is Zara Chen. I think there's something you need to understand about combined species military doctrine. What? When different species work together properly, nobody has to die. The goal isn't to defeat enemies. The goal is to solve problems that prevent different peoples from coexisting peacefully. Vexen felt something that warrior species weren't supposed to experience: confusion about fundamental military principles. But conflict is inevitable when resources are limited or territorial disputes arise. Only if you think like individual competitors instead of cooperative problem solvers, Zara replied. But when 47 different species pool their knowledge and capabilities, most resource and territory problems have solutions that benefit everyone involved. That is theoretical impossibility. Different species have incompatible needs and objectives. Actually, War Leader, that's exactly what we thought too, before we started working together. Want us to show you what we've learned? What followed would be remembered as the Academy Accords, though formal treaty negotiations wouldn't begin for several more hours. Instead of continuing military action, coalition forces found themselves invited aboard Academy Station for what Director Keth Mormon described as educational demonstrations of practical cooperation protocols. Toured Academy facilities that had been reorganized to accommodate the needs of multiple biological types simultaneously. They observed combined species engineering teams that had developed solutions to technical problems that individual species had struggled with for centuries. They watched medical personnel from different evolutionary origins working together to develop treatment protocols that could address injury or illness in any known biological system. Most importantly, they participated in strategic planning exercises where tactical problems that would have required massive military expenditure for individual species to solve were addressed through cooperative resource allocation and coordinated implementation. This is not possible, Vexen insisted after observing Academy cadets successfully mediate a resource dispute between 2 species that had been at war for over 3,000 years. Natural selection creates competition between species. Cooperation beyond species lines violates fundamental evolutionary principles. War leader Zara said patiently, "Do you know what humans call the most successful survival strategy in our planet's evolutionary history? Individual dominance through superior capabilities. Symbiosis, different species working together for mutual benefit." She gestured toward a display showing Academy organizational charts. Every major ecological system on Earth depends on cooperative relationships between organisms that have completely different capabilities and needs. But surely military applications require competitive advantages. War leader, may I ask you something? What would happen if your 7 species tried to solve major galactic problems using traditional competitive approaches? Vexhan considered the question. Traditional military doctrine suggested that resource conflicts would be resolved through superior force application, territorial disputes through conquest or negotiation from positions of strength, and technological challenges through independent research and development. With Trust Teddy, standard protocols would likely require centuries of military expenditure, and would probably result in ongoing conflicts that prevented optimal resource utilization, he admitted. But what if instead of competing with each other, all 7 species worked together to solve the same problems? The strategic implications were staggering: combined research capabilities that could accelerate technological development, shared resource networks that could eliminate scarcity-based conflicts, coordinated exploration and colonization efforts that could expand available territory faster than population growth required. Most importantly, military capabilities that could address external threats or natural disasters at levels that individual species could never achieve. You are suggesting that cooperation provides superior strategic advantages to competition. I'm suggesting that competition and cooperation serve different purposes, Zara replied. Competition drives innovation and improvement, but cooperation drives implementation and sustainability. And you believe that both approaches can coexist? War leader, that's exactly what we've been demonstrating. Academy cadets still compete with each other to improve individual capabilities, but they also cooperate to achieve tactical objectives that require multiple skill sets. War leader V,